Brilliance Audio presents House of Lies by D.S. Butler, performed by Henrietta Mear. Alison King swallowed nervously as she looked around the wood-panelled hall. Oil paintings covered the walls. On her first day at Chidlow House, she'd made the mistake of taking a close look at the artwork. It was disturbing. The hunting scenes were violent, and the portraits were odd. Stern-faced men and miserable women were scattered among the bloodthirsty canvases. She shuddered. It was just a house. A big, grand, empty house, but a house all the same. The Chidlow family had a long, checkered history, which delighted the teenage students Alison was teaching. At lunchtime, she'd overheard them sharing ghost stories about the drowned lady. Of course, she didn't believe in ghosts. She was a grown-up, not a naive, pliable teenager. But there was something about this house. Giving herself a mental shake, she squared her shoulders and walked on. The smells of old wood and dust from the thick curtains hung in the air as she walked past a large window which looked out onto the extensive gardens. It had a large windowsill with a cushioned seat, in theory a perfect reading nook, somewhere to curl up and disappear into a novel. In daylight, the house didn't seem nearly as scary. The sun streamed in through the large pane of glass, and the view across the lawns to the lake was undoubtedly beautiful. But when the shadows began to lengthen, and the creaks and groans of the old house took on an ominous tone, it was the last place Alison wanted to read. No, she couldn't imagine curling up and reading in a spot like this. Alison hadn't read more than a couple of pages since she'd arrived. She hadn't been able to relax enough to enter a fictional world, because that meant letting her guard down, and she couldn't do that. Not here. The house was oppressive, malevolent. Where had that thought come from? A house couldn't do any harm. The people in it, on the other hand. She paused and turned in a circle, confused, sure she'd heard something. Dripping water, a whisper. She stood still, her ears straining against the silence, but heard nothing. She was alone. This place was making her hypersensitive. It wasn't like her to be so skittish. Once she made it to her room, she could bolt the door and feel safe. But she couldn't go to her room yet. She had some important information for the director of the study program. Last night, she'd heard water trickling in the old pipes and scratching behind the walls. The scratching had probably been mice. Rodents creeping in through cracks and crevices wouldn't be unusual in a house of this age and size. That was the logical explanation. But at night, her mind played fanciful tricks. And though she didn't believe in spirits or otherworldly beings, the noises meant she'd stayed awake most of the night. A house she'd shared in her student days had had a rodent problem. They'd been nesting in the loft insulation and chewed through various wires, causing untold damage. She was annoyed at herself for getting spooked. When the students spoke about the haunting of Chidlow House, they did so in awed, thrilled whispers. They weren't scared of the drowned lady. If a group of teenagers could get through a week in the old house without having a panic attack, surely she could do the same. After all, she was the one who was supposed to be responsible for their welfare.